RWBY. After going for a solid 4 volumes, it seemed about that time that I bust out yet another top X list. So out of the possible 52, I believe, episodes, what are the best 6? Well, let me tell you. With my opinion, of course. Never Miss a Beat, Chapter 5 of Volume 3. So far, I believe out of every single episode in RWBY, this single-handedly is the funnest. You have the meme of Neon Cat, which is just a fun cat faunus who wields glow stick nunchucks, which is only improved by the fact that she's voiced by the equally as fun Meg Turney. That, coupled with her teammate being just a classic Achievement Hunter joke of Flint Cole, of course being voiced by Flint Flossie.
I wish we bloody had some Flint.
Gavin, here.
Yeah.
Cole?
I was hoping you had Flint, that's why I murdered you.
Cole?
Find Flint, Gavin.
Cole?
I got Flint Cole.
Alright, Flint Cole is now mine.
Alright.
Not only does this episode have an awesome fight, some new characters, but the music is some of my favorite in the entirety of the series. You have the first portion of the fight, which has the Neon theme, which just captures the scene so well. Neon's just skating around to the beat, messing with her opponent. Then the music switches to a jazz version of I Burn. The music just worked so well in this episode. It's not that it doesn't work in other episodes, the music in other episodes is just fine. It's just that this episode stood out over the others as just being fun with the fight scene, along with being introduced to new characters, to the subtle references. All those different factors are why this episode is on this list.
That was amazing!
Do you believe in destiny? Those 5 words. Man, the weirdest thing about this episode being on this list is I went back, obviously, to rewatch it and tell you beat for beat why this episode is on this list. But I couldn't tell you why. What I can tell you is it's in that Pyrrha and Jean scene, but I couldn't place my finger onto why I love this scene. Obviously, it has something to do with Pyrrha going on about destiny. However, anytime I try to elaborate on that, I can't. I've always been a fan of that ideology of destiny, even before RWBY, whether it be shows, games, books, real life, what have you. That topic of destiny I love, but I am incapable of elaborating why this scene in this episode is so great. But it is.
You can't let anything stand in your way.
KUROYURI, the backstory of the Ren family. The flashbacks are what made this episode absolutely amazing. After 3 years, relatively speaking, of not knowing much about the backstory of either Ren or Nora, this episode fed, I think, just the right amount of information for Ren. Because all we were told previous to this was that Ren and Nora were orphans and the two knew each other from childhood. So that left a lot of people to fill in the blanks, including myself. So the episode was able to tell us, yes, Ren and Nora were both orphans, but Ren absolutely did know his parents. Nora, however, her past is still just as much of an enigma as it was before this episode. However, this episode was supposed to be about Ren. It wasn't at all about Nora. They didn't need to explain how Nora found her way to KUROYURI, or why she's a street rat, because the episode was all about Ren, and how Ren met Nora. And that's what's great about this episode. It answered a lot of questions that fans had about Ren, but while also providing even more questions about Nora, which is a good trade-off. You answer some questions, but raise even more. I also loved, similar to the Never Miss a Beat episode, we were introduced to more characters. Lai's mother and father, they were in and they were out. Out meaning they were killed, but I mean still, nonetheless they were introduced, and their characters worked. Lee's personality was such a cool, philosophical type personality relative to other characters in the show. Ozpin kind of had a similar vibe going on, but Lee's seemed so much different. He felt as though he was a leader trying to train Ren to fight. He was such a badass character. That, coupled with Ren's loving mother, it was such a nice flashback. You know, up until their deaths. It was such a good episode during Volume 4, and it is on this list.
My name's Nairen.
Heroes and Monsters. This episode was solid through and through. Most of the episodes on this list, even the ones that come ahead of this one, are usually centered around one scene specifically that made it go above and beyond other episodes. but Heroes and Monsters was such a good episode from beginning to end. The reveal of Velvet's weapon was, I believe, near perfect timing. It wasn't an overhyped thing that left fans disappointed. You raised a few eyebrows here and there thinking, why are you taking pictures right now? But those out of the ordinary moments aren't out of the ordinary. They revealed her weapon at a climactic battle for the volume, which was one of the best fights that happened in Volume 3. And then everything that happened after this went downhill, but downhill in a good way. First, you had the fight with Neo, Ruby, and Roman, where Neo gets flung off the airship. Which, you know, chances are she's still alive. I believe most of the fan base thinks she's still alive somewhere, with a small portion thinking she's dead. So that was kind of sad to see a loved character just get flung off like that. Then you have Roman, which I think is the exact opposite from Neo, where I think the majority believe he's dead, with the small portion thinking he's alive. So they offed one character and just flung another into the air. And then after this, it just hysterically kept getting worse. Adam, I'm gonna take everything away from you. Well, that's not good. Then, the maiden transfer begin, only for an arrow to get shot in Amber's chest. Well, that's even worse. And then Yang gets her arm chopped off. Well, I'm at a loss for words. And then Blake gets her head chopped off. What? Oh, okay, she's fine. The one good thing that happened was that Blake didn't get her head chopped off. That's fucked up that was the good thing. It's such a captivating sequence of events that unfolds during this episode that you just can't help but do nothing. You're not happy, you're not sad, you're just in shock. And that is the reason this episode is on this list.
You have got to be kidding me!
Burning the candle. Half of the things that went on in this episode were pretty standard, the first quarter and the final quarter, both parts that had to do with the dance. However, in the middle is where I believe it hits the hardest to make it such a good episode. While I think that the conversation between Ren and Jean was above average, it's specifically the part with Pyrrha that made this quarter of the episode such a sweet and amazing part. Because while the conversation between Jean and Ren is about Jean wanting to confess his feelings to Weiss, the conversation also reflects Pyrrha to Jean, while also coupling the fact that Pyrrha tells Jean how to go about it while she herself is incapable of doing so, which makes the whole scene have such a sweet and bitter feeling all at the same time. Now you might be asking, if it was such a good scene, then why isn't another episode that was much more powerful between the two in the number 2 spot, such as many episodes in Volume 3? Well, that's because of the scene that follows. This scene between Blake and Yang is showing how close of a team they are, how close friends they are. Because what Yang is doing is more than just telling Blake a story from her past. More than likely, the only people who know this story were those involved. Yang, Ruby, Crow, Tai, maybe a few others I didn't mention. This story that Yang is telling to Blake was meant to do what it effectively did, and that's build trust. When you give another individual information about yourself that's not known to many other people, that is telling them, without actually saying it, that you trust them. Now this is usually a back and forth type deal. I give you information about me, you give me information about you. Blake didn't reciprocate such information in this scene because she already had previously. Yang was simply returning the favor. You're chasing the White Fang, I'm chasing my mother. Yang found common ground from which to build from. If Yang instead gave Blake information like, Ruby is my half-sister, the weight with Blake's information is completely different to that of Yang's. But Yang was capable of finding similar information of the same weight that the two of them held, and managed to build the two's trust even further than it ever was. And it's because of this scene that Burning the Candle is my second favorite episode.
Not just for you, but for the people you care about.
Black and White is by far my favorite episode to date. A lot of it has to do with the Blake and Sun fight scene, which I'll come to soon. But even the information that we learned from this episode, from the White Fang's history essentially, to Blake's affiliation to it, as well as even being introduced to Sun and getting a sense of his personality. Now like I said earlier, the biggest reason this is by far my favorite episode was the Sun and Blake fight. The thing that I always thought made RWBY stand out from other anime and shows were its fight scenes. Monty always said he was a better dancer than he was fighter, and I believe this episode is the perfect example of that message. While just watching the episode by itself doesn't exactly convey that, but when you pair the fight scene with the music it was choreographed to, it really shows that Monty's fights were more so dances with attacks mixed in, which is the reason they felt so fluid. Here's a portion of the fight without the music as seen in the regular episode. And here's that exact same scene, but with the music it was choreographed to. When you couple those things with the fact that this isn't even technically the first time we've seen that fight. As talked about, Monty animated that fight around that music, but he had a completely different rig to everything. As you can see right now, you have Roman's son Blake all even before RWBY was even a thing. And it's because of that I love this fight sequence in this episode more so than any other one in the series. It just conveys so much with the fight to the multi-purposes of the weapons and the choreography. Everything is just so well done in this one fight scene alone. To me, it conveys the message of this is what made RWBY what it is. Anytime I try to show RWBY to someone who's not interested in it, more times than not, I will show them this fight scene. Then I'll show them the music and give them a feel as to why RWBY was unique and awesome. And even continuing on with the episode, it's not even the only fight we get in it. While I wasn't as hot about the Penny fight, because when you learn about certain scenes or story relevance, it can make said thing much cooler, similar to as previously mentioned fight scene, or it can make you feel a little more disappointed because you get that sense of what could have been. While the Penny fight scene was great and the reveal of her being a robot was just fine at the time, when I learned that wasn't exactly meant to be her reveal, technically speaking, I was left with that sense of it could have been cooler. Because in Volume 2, when she was hit by the van, if I'm not mistaken, that was supposed to be the first hint as to what Penny really was. So once I learned that, it made her reveal and fight in Volume 1 a little less interesting to me, but it's still such a minor complaint, if that's even what it is, that I have with this episode. It's still so far ahead of every other episode or fight scene so far, that it's comfortably sitting as my #1 favorite episode in RWBY. So what do you guys think? Were some of your guys' favorite episodes on this list? Or are there other ones that you guys consider your favorite? Let me know what episode you liked the most in the comments below and why you liked it. Whether it be because of the fights or the story, or it was just fun. Let me know. Also be sure to like this video while you're at it, subscribe if you're interested in more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.